These are gonna be real creamy. Bart, how do I wrap this up? Hey everyone, I'm Kenji Lopez-Alt. I am a New York Times columnist and a cookbook author. I'm gonna be making some scrambled eggs today. So I'm gonna first show you a couple of real basic ways to make scrambled eggs, and then I'm gonna show you a couple of sort of unique ways that will give you these eggs that have a different texture from your normal scrambled eggs. We're gonna start with the most basic kind. I'm gonna do a couple eggs here. Let's say 3 eggs. I'm gonna salt my eggs in advance. You might have heard people tell you never to salt your eggs until they're done. They might have told you that the eggs will come out sort of tough or gray or watery. I've tested this pretty extensively. In fact, what happens when you salt your eggs beforehand is they will come out more tender and more moist. The salt actually dissolves some of the egg proteins so that as they're cooking, they don't tighten up as much, and so they don't squeeze out as much moisture. What you find is that if you don't salt your eggs in advance and you cook them, they can sort of start to weep out water as they sit. Whereas if you salt your eggs in advance, they retain that moisture. If you can do this up to about 15 minutes before you start cooking them, you get up in the morning, you salt your eggs, you go wake up the kids, brush your teeth, do whatever you have to do, then come back and scramble them, the texture will be even better. So our pan, we're doing a nonstick skillet here. I've never actually used one of these ceramic pans before. One of the things that can really affect the finished texture of your eggs is the starting temperature of your pan when the eggs go in. So if your pan is cold when the eggs go in, you end up with these really dense, creamy, sort of almost custardy scrambled eggs. Whereas if your pan is hot, what happens is as soon as your egg goes in, the moisture in there starts to evaporate, it bubbles rapidly, and so you end up with these sort of lighter, fluffier scrambled eggs. The difficulty though is that it's really hard to tell what the temperature of the pan is when there's no food in it. So what I do is I add a little bit of water like this, and as the pan is heating up, I just swirl that water around. By doing that, I'm guaranteeing that the surface temperature of the pan is not going to rise above the boiling point of water, above 100 degrees Celsius. And luckily, that temperature, around a little bit above 100 degrees Celsius, is the exact temperature that I want for my eggs. That's the temperature where you're going to get sort of a medium fluffiness. So not super dense and creamy, not really light and fluffy, but what I like, which is sort of tender curds that are fluffy, but still very moist. As soon as that water evaporates, or there's barely any water left, that's when we know the pan is at a good temperature. I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of butter, give that a little swirl, just to coat the bottom. I'm going to go in with my eggs. If you want your eggs fluffier, you can let them sit a bit and just stir really gently. If you want them creamier, you can stir them more vigorously. And that's really how you're going to change the final texture of the eggs. Now, the important thing to remember when you're cooking scrambled eggs is that whatever it is in the pan, it's going to be a little bit drier on the plate. So you actually want to take them out of the pan before they look like they're done. See, right now these eggs look kind of perfect. I'm gonna let this sit for an extra 30 seconds and then we'll see what happens, all right? How long has it been, 15 seconds? 18 seconds. All right, it's only been 18 seconds and let's see what's happened here. So even with 18 seconds sitting there, you can see these eggs have already like completely dried out, almost completely dried out. Not really the texture I want. What I find to be a little bit difficult about scrambled eggs is that if you get distracted at all, they're gonna completely change texture. The 2 recipes I'm gonna show you now kind of attempt to solve that problem. And also, sort of build in some textures that you wouldn't find just from regular eggs. So the first recipe I'm going to show you is my extra creamy scrambled eggs. This is probably the strangest scrambled egg recipe you're ever going to see. It starts with cornstarch, which seems a little bit strange, but it's actually a relatively common addition to egg dishes in China. So dishes like scrambled eggs with tomatoes often has a little bit of a cornstarch slurry to it. Huanpoa-styled scrambled eggs, which are these sort of like these eggs that you cook in a wok that come out as this sort of like creamy golden wave of eggs. They often have a cornstarch slurry added to them. The slurry is going to help the eggs remain tender and also get a sort of creamier texture to them and retain moisture a little bit more. So we got a little bit of a cornstarch slurry there. I've got cold butter that's been cut into little cubes. This is a technique that I learned from my friend Francis Lamb, who I think he learned it from Daniel Boulud, who makes his omelets this way. So you add little cold cubes of butter to the omelets, and as the butter melts into the eggs, it keeps them tender. 4 eggs, pinch of salt, beat these all up together. And meanwhile, I'm gonna do the same thing with my pan. I'm gonna get a little bit of water in there, just to gauge the temperature. Shake the pan just to make sure that it's an even temperature. A medium-high heat here. If you're scared about how fast your eggs cook, you can reduce it down to medium, no problem. So we're gonna put the rest of that butter in there, little cubes of butter. By the way, these are like weekend eggs, so it's about a tablespoon of butter per egg, which is a lot. You can absolutely get away with using a quarter of that amount of butter, an eighth of that amount of butter. You know, use as much or as little butter as you want. But I'm sort of making these like real extra creamy, extra rich, what I call weekend eggs. You know? So we're gonna get them in there. We're just gonna give it a stir. Because we add that cornstarch slurry in there, the proteins just don't bind as tightly. So what that means is that for any given sort of doneness, say you like your eggs really firm or really soft, they're going to be extra moist. So if you make them exactly the same as you normally would, they will come out just that much moister. And the other good thing is that they don't overcook as easily. So you can leave these in the pan an extra 15, 18, 30 seconds, and they're going to be just fine. They're still going to be plenty moist because of that cornstarch slurry, and obviously all the extra butter as well. This is just about where I like them. So really, really sort of moist and creamy, nice soft curds. I like to finish my eggs off with some chives, a little crack of black pepper. All right, so those are the extra creamy scrambled eggs with a bit of a cornstarch slurry and a bit of butter. So our final scrambled egg recipe, this is what I call my velvety scrambled eggs. I'd been playing around for a little bit with cooking things in heavy cream instead of butter. Lisa Steele, who wrote a book called Fresh Eggs Daily, she has a wonderful recipe for cream fried eggs where you put cream in a saucepan, you break your eggs into it, and you cook it until the cream caramelizes. I thought, what would happen if you cook scrambled eggs in cream? So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start with 3 tablespoons of heavy cream in a pan here. Meanwhile, I'm going to, once again, salt my eggs. This time I'm just gonna add some of the chives right in there, just for funsies. Did I say just funsies? No, just for fun. Let's add some black pepper in there as well. So we're gonna beat this really well. Now with these ones, I really want there to be sort of no bits of sort of streaky egg whites. I really want it to be nice and smooth. As you're gonna see, we're gonna kind of drizzle this into the cream, and that's how we're cooking it. All right, so once our cream is at a simmer like this, I'm gonna take my eggs and kind of just, the way I would do almost like egg drop soup, I just take my chopsticks or a fork or whatever and just kind of drizzle them in. And what you're gonna end up with is eggs that have an almost sort of like ribbony quality to them. Sort of a unique texture. We're gonna really gently swirl these around. And as they're just about to finish, I'm gonna take that last tablespoon of heavy cream, dump it in, and just stir it. And that's just gonna give them that extra level of velvety moistness. So these are going to be by far the sort of creamiest, most velvety eggs. These are the kind that you might very carefully pile onto toast and eat with a napkin on your lap. Finish it off with a little chives, a little bit more black pepper. And there you go. So these are one way to overcook scrambled eggs and 2 different ways to make them really nice and creamy. So this is the extra creamy scrambled eggs, which has a bit of a cornstarch slurry in there and little cubes of butter. This is what I call my weekend eggs. And these are your velvety scrambled eggs. So these are the ones where they're cooked in heavy cream. There's a little bit of heavy cream added at the very end. So they're very, very creamy, very, very loose, something that you would put onto a nice, I like to put them on top of shokupan, Japanese toast. And I do that like sort of in place of butter on the toast, and it's really, really great. All right, so 3 different kinds of eggs. I'm gonna try all 3 of them. My cold, overcooked scrambled eggs. I'm sure they're actually gonna be still fine. Yeah, they're still real good. A little bit dry, a little bit leathery. All right, let's try the extra creamy kind. I cooked them till what would be the equivalent of a sort of a medium scramble for me. They're much softer and more tender and moister and creamier and all those other words that make you uncomfortable. And finally, these are the velvety ones. So these are gonna be real, real creamy. Oh, look at that. I use heavy cream here. If you want a little bit more flavor, a little bit of that tang, you can actually use creme fraiche exactly the same way you use heavy cream, and it'll give it a little bit of that tang. It's real good with heavy cream though. You can find the recipe for extra creamy scrambled eggs and for velvety scrambled eggs, as well as my other recipes and many other amazing recipes on nytcooking.com.